Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. Hello from all around the world. Salaam alaikum, shalom, peace be upon you from wherever you're watching my channel. And some of you already is mentioning in the comments below that they're reading the book of my guest, and they're halfway on that. And I think it's a great time to jump with Dan Kovalik. Dan, thank you very much for today for being my guest. You are an American human rights lawyer, a peace activist. You also taught international human rights at University of Pittsburgh School of Law for many years, and I think it's a great academic and also humanitarian background to start this discussion with you today on Syriana Analysis, which is the ongoing onslaught against the Gaza Strip. I've been following the street in the United States for quite some time, especially when it comes to Israel. I know it's a very sensitive issue. And there are American lawyers like yourself and also peace activists like yourself in the US who are unapologetically in support of Israel. And they say they are doing this because Israel is the bastion of democracy and human rights in the region, and Israel represents the American values in the region. And through Israel, they will promote and spread these values to the jungle, which is the other backward Arabs in the region. This is how they portray, right, the rest of the people. But you stand on the opposite side of this. How do you justify your position when you are faced with your colleagues, your countrymen in the United States who do similar work, such as in human rights field, and they're also lawyers like yourself?
Yeah, well, my position comes from many years of living, of traveling. I didn't always believe the things I do now. I was raised in a very conservative Roman Catholic household. And I believed that America and Israel stood for democracy and freedom and all that, and Judeo-Christian values. And then, over time, I came to realize that that wasn't true. That in fact, everything was its opposite. And I'll give you an example. I continue to be surprised in my travels. I always feel like I know a lot of stuff, but then I go somewhere and I'm shocked. So I was mentioning before we started the show that in 2021, I visited Malula twice, Malula, Syria. It's one of the last places on earth where people speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ, right? And it has an ancient church and monastery there. It's an amazing place. I mean, hey, if you can go there, go there. Syria, by the way, is a beautiful country. I mean, obviously it's on hard times, but it's still a beautiful place. But Malula was amazing. And what I found out there was that in 2013, the Free Syrian Army, which both the United States and Israel and Qatar and other countries was supporting, invaded Malula, tried to destroy the church there, managed to destroy a lot of relics and paintings, took the nuns there at the convent hostage, and really tried to destroy the town. Why? Because it's a Christian town, and that was anathema to their radical version of Islam, if you want to call it that. I think it's not Islam. I think it's a heretical version, but whatever. What most shocked me was that it was Hezbollah, along with the Syrian armed forces, that drove the FSA out. That is to say that Hezbollah defended the church. And they did the same thing in Homs when that Christian community was attacked, and the church there, which was built in 59 AD, was attacked. I found this, I mean, I was shocked. I didn't know a lot about Hezbollah, but I guess I thought they were kind of an extremist, Islamic group, whatever. And I find that that's just not true at all. And of course, I also found that the government in Syria, which has been greatly maligned, was in fact defending the Christian communities there. So the point is, everything I was told about the world was just not true, and that the U.S. and Israel are not supporting democracy in the Middle East. They're certainly not supporting peace. They've destroyed every secular government that's existed in the region, and actually tend to support these extremist groups like ISIS, like Daesh, and even Al-Qaeda. I mean, we can go back, of course, we can go back as far as we want, but I mean, to me, what jumps out is the U.S. support for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 70s and going into the 80s, which, of course, one of the leaders of that was a guy named Osama bin Laden. So, the U.S. and Israel support terror. They undermine secular governments. They destroy, everywhere they go, destroy antiquities, ancient churches and mosques. They did that. Of course, the U.S. did that in Iraq. Israel's doing that right now in a big way in Gaza. They've destroyed over 100 historic sites. I mean, they're literally destroying history in Gaza right now.
They're wiping out the existence of the region completely from the collective memory in terms of architecture, in terms of the culture, in terms of the population, and their collective memory of what Gaza Strip represented to these people. And this is a similar strategy they have done in Syria, in my opinion.
Yes.
Like when I left Syria, I still have these beautiful memories about Syria. The memory that I left Syria is different from what Syria is at the moment. And when I speak with my friends in Syria, they tell me, don't compare the Syria that is in your mind with what it is at the current moment, especially after the destruction. And this destruction and the erosion of the memories, of the artifacts, of the, you mentioned a few examples, for example, Malula, which is a very important religious village, and it has a historical and civilizational importance. Palmyra is one of which. So the destruction of these areas also aims at, in my opinion, to erase the memory of the people of how important their country is. So they're stripping the country from its civilizational importance, so that the people would be less encouraged and motivated in order to defend their own countries when the shit hits the fan, in my opinion.
Well, that's right. And I think the other reason is because certainly when you talk about Israel, it's based on a lie, right? The lie of a people without a land without a people, right? I won't get into the people without a land. I'll let other people decide whether that sentence is true or not. But certainly the sentence, a land without a people, was a lie. There were people in Palestine when Israel was founded in 1948. There were many Muslims, Christians, and there were Jews living there quite happily, in fact. And they had a developed economy, they had cities. And the big lie that I've heard many times from Zionists is that, the Zionists came in and they took over the land without a people. Yeah, there were some people, but they were living like nomads and they didn't have an economy, and they lived in the desert, and Israel came in and they built this great civilization from the ground up, from the desert that these people lived in. And that's a lie. It's not true. So to prove the lie, they are going to drive Gaza back to the Stone Age. They're going to try to make it into what they claimed it was before they got there. And they want to do that in Syria, and they want to do that in Lebanon, which has also been greatly destroyed. I mean, I was in Beirut, which used to be called the Paris of the East. It's still physically beautiful because of the scenery. It's on the Mediterranean. But it's a disaster economically. There's no electricity. When I was there was barely any garbage collection. I mean, it was incredible what had happened to the Paris of the East, right? And all this is by design. I think that the goal is to create, this greater Israel. But again, the only way to do that is to wipe out the history of these people, of these great civilizations. And so again, this goes back to the question you first asked me. Again, and it goes to the title, of course, of this talk that you had, that every accusation of Israel and the U.S. all had is a confession. Mm-hmm. They claim to be defending civilization when in fact they're destroying it. They're intentionally destroying it. And if you go to a country like Iran, which I've been to, you'll see that they've tried to preserve civilization and history, right? They have ancient Zoroastrian ruins. They have Armenian Christian churches. They even have synagogues there. They have the largest Jewish community outside of Israel.
Yes.
And, what you realize, of course, is that none of that would exist if the U.S. invaded Iran like it invaded Iraq, right? The ruins of the Zoroastrians would be gone. The Assyrian churches would be gone. So who's defending civilization here? It's not the U.S. and Israel. In fact, it's the resistance. And again, I go back to Hezbollah and this thing that I learned that they've defended even Christian churches, and they've done that in Lebanon too, because they have a pluralistic view of the world, which strangely enough, the U.S. and Israel, which claim to be pluralistic societies, do not have a pluralistic view of the world. They want it to be monolithic. I mean, I think if they got their way, in fact, and some of it goes back to the fact that they're these unfettered capitalist systems, they'd be happy if these countries were nothing but parking lots lined with Starbucks and McDonald's. And they even talk about turning Gaza into a parking lot. They talked about turning Vietnam into a parking lot. So I'm not even, I'm not being hyperbolic here at all. And so the point is, I don't abide by that. I believe in culture. I believe in language. I believe in diversity, true diversity. I see the history of the region in the Levant as our collective history, as someone who studied the Bible as a Catholic. I want to go back to places like Malula. I want to go to the El Aqsa Mosque. I want to go to other great Muslim sites. That's part of our collective history. And Israel and the United States are systematically destroying them. And if they get their way, all those things will be gone. And again, just look at Gaza. There was a story, NPR did a story a few weeks ago, and they interviewed someone at a nonprofit that essentially tries to catalog great historic sites and to maintain them and all that. And again, they said that there were over 100 important historic sites destroyed in Gaza, which include many mosques, which include the third oldest Christian church in the world, the Rafa Museum, which housed all these antiquities, which is now under rubble. Anyone with a heart, anyone who cares about history, anyone who cares about humanity cannot be but heartbroken right now. And, and we know who to blame. And it's not hard to see. It's there. It's there to see if you want to see it. And you can see who's defending the history.
Actually, it's not hard to see. And there could be some people who are motivated by, let's say, religion. Those are who belong from the Muslim communities when it comes to Israel. I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, and I lived in Syria. I witnessed firsthand what the Americans did to Syria, and I cannot forgive what the Americans did there, right? So when people try to come and say, you have to be objective with politics, etc., yeah, I can be objective, but at the same time, the stake of my country, the faith of my country, the people, the civilization that I lived my entire life, and I was educated there. I drank from the waters of Syria. I ate from the meat of Syria. My grandparents survived the Armenian genocide, and when they arrived to Syria, those were the Syrians who embraced and they protected them against the Ottoman Empire, who were persecuting the Armenians. So I owe the Syrians for protecting my family, and I owe them for everything they have presented to me. They treated me like an equal citizen. And at no time, as a Christian, as an Orthodox, as an Armenian, ethnic Armenian, I felt that there is a discrimination against me. This was the beauty of Syria. And one of the beautiful countries in the region is, of course, Palestine. And recently you were in Palestine and you posted a few impressions about your visit to Palestine. So the question here would be, why did you visit Palestine at this time? Where did you go? And what impressions did you bring with you that those who never been to Palestine should know about it?
Well, I went because of what's happening right now. I felt like I had to pay witness to what my country, the United States, is doing to the people of Palestine, and that I had to be there in solidarity with them. I just feel in my life, I don't feel I can stay on the sidelines, when history is happening and when my country's doing bad things. I want to be with the people who were hurting, so that was what motivated me. And I went through Jordan. I flew into Amman, Jordan, and because basically the Tel Aviv airport, Ben Gurion airport, though the Israelis won't admit it, it is open, but it's not, practically speaking, it's not operating, not in any serious way. It would have taken me 45 hours to fly there. There's only a couple airlines flying out of there. No U.S. airlines are flying out of there now, So I flew into Amman, Jordan, and I went by land across the King Hussein Bridge across the Dead Sea and into Palestine. I mean, and it's an amazing thing. Again, talking about history, the first town you come to when you cross that bridge into Palestine is Jericho, which is the oldest continuous city in the world. It's still a walled city, too. Again, if you know your Bible, you could know all about the wall and the wall coming down and all that. And then you drive through the desert and you see the Bedouin communities, which are also being oppressed by Israel. And they live very rough there and are treated very badly. And then I stayed in Ramallah. I stayed with a friend named Amal and her husband Mohammed, both of whom have been active since the first Intifada. They both were arrested during the first Intifada, and they were deported for a time. They're back now. And the first thing I'll say is, you know, you don't like to make generalizations about people, but I have found it to be almost invariably true that Palestinians, whether they live in Palestine or outside, are some of the most hospitable people you'll ever meet and kindest people.
Yes.
I was won over to their cause, yes, in part by politics, but also by the humanity that I've seen in them, the kindness that they've shown to me. And I tell people this all the time. It's not just Palestinians, it's everyone in the Levant. This is true. You go to Syria, you go to Lebanon, even, you know, Iran's not in the Levant, but I felt the same thing in Iran. This old world hospitality. Everyone, even the poorest family you go to, they'll give you coffee and some treats. They would never consider having you in their home without feeding you, right? I think one day when I had a real busy schedule meeting families, I think I had 5 meals that day or something. So one is the humanity of the Palestinian people, even in the face of incredible, incredible repression. Because what's happening in the West Bank, and all of this was happening while I was there, is that there is a greatly increased repression by the Israeli armed forces and settlers against the population there. Around 300 Palestinians have been killed since October 7th. By a combination of settlers and armed forces who support the settlers. They will many times be standing by as settlers carry out various pogroms and whatnot. That number exceeds all of the Palestinians killed in the West Bank in 2022, to give it some perspective. And they are arresting people, mostly young men, en masse. Again, around 3,000 Palestinians have been arrested since October 7th, which is a staggering number of people. Yes. And everywhere I was and everywhere I traveled to, this was happening. So in Ramallah, one morning I was there, Israeli forces invaded the city to shut down a printing company, a small printing company run by a Palestinian who's in an Israeli jail. They claimed he was a terrorist, so they shut down his company and stole his printing press. Even though I should mention that Ramallah is in Area A, as per the Oslo Agreement, as per now Israeli law and international law, which means the Israelis aren't even supposed to be allowed to enter there. But they enter at will. The very building I was staying in with my friend Amal and Mohammed, that had been invaded a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago by Israeli soldiers who arrested a young man from their building. They ended up killing 2 people in the process, tried to shoot a third person who I interviewed. The day I tried to go to Jerusalem, I wanted to go through, there's a crossing, and I'm forgetting the name of it, begins with a Q, that is the closest crossing to get to Jerusalem from Ramallah. That was closed because Israeli forces had invaded the refugee camp right near the crossing. They killed 1 person, injured 5 others, and they destroyed the goods of merchants there, mostly amounting to food. They threw out all this food, and that was happening. So we had to go around, and it took 2 hours to get from Ramallah to Jerusalem. And it should be said that I think the distance between Ramallah and Jerusalem is something like 8 miles or something. It should take 10 or 15 minutes. It took 2 hours. But this is the life of Palestinians. I mean, this is what they go through every day, that a trip that should take 15 minutes will often take an hour or 2 or 3 or 4, especially if they have to go through a crossing. and they're harassed by Israeli guards or arrested or even sometimes killed, I went on a tour of Jerusalem with a human rights lawyer, and he and others have told me that Jerusalem's getting the worst of it at this time. The demolition of homes, of Palestinian homes, is increasing. The building of the settlements is increasing. The arrest of people, murder of people within Jerusalem is increasing. And this is all part of Israel's plan, of course, to take over all of Jerusalem. East Jerusalem under international law is Palestinian.
Yeah.
But of course, as we know, Donald Trump as president recognized East Jerusalem, all of Jerusalem, as the capital of Israel, which is what Israel wants, but which again flies in the face of international law. I don't think any other country in the world recognizes that. But Israel's taken advantage of that to try to take over all of East Jerusalem.
Yeah, Trump also recognized Golan Heights as part of the Israeli side. And you, Dan, as far as I know, that you're going to publish a new book next year. I want to know a little bit about the book that you are going to publish. Where are they going to find the book, which is the case for Palestine, why it matters, and why you should care about it? Where can they find, when are you going to publish this book, and why should they care about Palestine?
Yeah, well, it comes out in March of next year, and they can pre-order it on Amazon, as you can see from your screen there. But you can also get it from my publisher at skyhorsepublishing.com. And it should be available at your local bookstore. If they don't happen to have it, they'll order it for you. But now you can pre-order it from Amazon. I know people don't like Amazon, and for very good reason, but as an author, it kind of is our lifeblood a little, and if there's enough pre-orders, it definitely helps. So I would encourage people to do that.
I will, guys, the link of the book is in the description below. If you don't like to buy from Amazon, you can check the publisher and you can buy it directly from the publisher. But in any case, I will put the link in the description, and also I will put the link now in the live chat, just for you also to save and pre-order the book if you like, whether through Amazon or by the publisher or through the publisher. But the title here is interesting, why you should care. Why should someone who doesn't live in Palestine or in the Middle East or an American or European or Westerner should care about Palestine?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons. I mean, one is, as a human being, you should care about human suffering, and you should care that people are suffering. And I think, in truth, there's probably, while it's not a competition, it's hard to find a people that are more that are enduring more suffering than the people of Palestine, especially right now in Gaza. Well, and in fact, I mean, the numbers show that the most amount of children per day are being killed than in any conflict that we know of, even World War II. More journalists have been killed there than in any conflict that we know of since that number's been counted. More UN workers have been killed there since the founding of the United Nations. I mean, by any measure, and now at least half the population is starving. 1.8 million people have been internally displaced. That's out of 2.3 million. Around 15,000 people have died. I think it's like 8,000 or 9,000 children. I mean, what we're seeing is something, again, we have never seen since World War II. And even in some ways, there's numbers that exceed what happened in World War II. For that only reason, you should care, because these are fellow human beings that are enduring this. And they're fellow human beings that are enduring it with because our government, the United States government, is sending arms and munitions and money to Israel to carry out this conflict. Yes. Israel could not be doing what they're doing without the United States supporting it, and other Western countries. And not just through arms, but also diplomatically and politically. The U.S. has vetoed every resolution at the Security Council that could have brought a ceasefire or even called for the protection of civilians in Gaza. The other reason is because the Palestinian people are history. I mean, you have the first Christians are Palestinians. Major Muslim sites in history are in Palestine as well. If we lose all that history and we lose this people, again, we lose our collective history. And I can't impress that on people more. I mean, we're witnessing a genocide. And what is a genocide? I mean, it's the attempt to destroy in whole or in part a particular group of protected people, in this case, the Palestinian people. And we are seeing, what could amount to the total destruction of those people. Already, in this, I'll quote, I believe it was the Washington Post used the word that the Christian community in Gaza is nearing extinction.
Yes.
They already had lost a huge portion of their population after that they fled after Israel essentially laid siege to Gaza beginning in 2007, I think. And now with the destruction of that ancient church, with many Christians inside that church, literally they're on the verge of extinction. Many important cultural aspects of human existence are on the verge of extinction at this point. Yes. Those are reasons to care. I mean, again, I think the human reason is the main one, and I think, I'd like to appeal to that. But again, if you're a Christian, as I think 60% of Americans are, if you're a Muslim, which another significant portion is, even if you're Jewish, there's many Jewish Palestinians too, you should care. And these are our people who are dying, and our culture and our history. And it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
Dan, what is also dying? Not only the people, but the prospect of the Palestinian state. Yesterday or 2 days ago, the Israeli ambassador to the UK, she was on the Sky News, and she categorically rejected the notion that the Palestinians should have a state for themselves. I want to play this 1 minute video, and I would like to hear your opinion about it.
Two-state solution? Is there still a chance for a two-state solution?
I think it's about time for the world to realize the Oslo paradigm failed on the 7th of October, and we need to build a new one. And in order to build a new one...
Does that new one include the Palestinians living in a state of their own? Is that what it includes?
I think the biggest question is, what type of Palestinians are on the other side? This is what Israel realized on the 7th of October. The answer is absolutely no, and I'll tell you why.
Well, then how can there be peace? How can there be peace in
the reason there is no peace
Israel
is because the Palestinians...
without offering a state to Palestine, how can there be peace in Israel?
Israel knows today, and the world should know now, the reason the Oslo Accords failed is because the Palestinians never wanted to have a state next to Israel. They want to have a state from the river to the sea.
So the two-state solution is dead.
Why are you obsessed with a formula that never worked, that created these radical people in the other side? Why are you obsessed with that?
So then, why is this journalist obsessed with the two-state solution? And is Israel killed the two-state solution, in your opinion, with such a statement, which is coming from the representative of the Israeli government to the UK, right?
Yeah, well, the truth is, I believe Israel killed the two-state solution a long time ago. First of all, let's talk about from the river to the sea. The Oslo Accords actually contemplated a Palestinian state that would run from the river to the sea. It wouldn't be the entire area of what is called now Israel or Palestine, however you call it. But it would include Gaza and West Bank, and it would have a connection between those two, and that would connect the river to the sea. So there's nothing radical about that statement. Israel agreed to that in the Oslo Accords. But what Israel has done, and by the way, I talk to people, but when you go to Israel, however you want to call it, Israel, Palestine, what you'll be shocked by is how small it is. I mean, again, if you didn't have all these walls and all these checkpoints and whatnot, you could get from one town to the other like that. People told me they used to drive to Gaza before the Oslo Accords in half an hour from the West Bank. Okay. So, by the way, connecting the river to the sea ain't that big of a deal. That's, connecting a half-hour drive, right? But Israel quickly after the Oslo Accords made moves to prevent a two-state solution. Why? Because they made sure there couldn't be another state. So one, they prevented this contiguous state, the connection between Gaza and the West Bank, and they have pockmarked the West Bank with numerous Israeli settlements, right? So you can see that everyone has seen that picture of, right, here's Palestine in 1948, and here it was in 1967, and a little later in today. And the West Bank, the green sections are Palestinian, and then you have white sections where the Israeli settlements are. It looks like Swiss cheese, right? There is no even contiguous state that would exist within the West Bank because of all these Israeli settlements, and they continue to build those settlements at a breakneck pace to make sure that the Palestinians cannot have control over that land. And then, of course, they ended up in around 2007, after Operation Cast Lead, they put a giant metal fence around Gaza, and they have totally enclosed that in what some people call the largest open-air prison in the world, or the largest concentration camp in the world. And again, making sure that there would be no connection between Gaza and the West Bank. So it is Israel that never wanted to comply with the Oslo Accords. And they have prevented any hope for a two-state solution. And that is the sad truth of it. And I think the two-state solution is dead, and it's because of Israel. And I think my own view, and I agree with Edward Said, who was writing about this even back in 1999, the only just resolution is one multi-ethnic, multi-religious state. One person, one vote. We have something like that in a country called, I don't know, the United States of America. I mean, why would we oppose such a thing, right?
But Israel will not accept that because demographically speaking, they're not multiplying like the Arabic people. So they will say that statistically speaking or demographically speaking, the Arabs will rule over them on the long run. So that is the case why they want to kick at least now 2.2 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. They're literally minimizing the number of the Palestinians who live over that territory if in the future there would be a prospect for one state solution that is ruled by Israel, but at the same time so that they finish the demographic danger, as they call it, on the Israeli state.
Yes, well, I agree with you that they don't want that, but I think I believe in time they're going to have to accept it. First of all, I think the view that Palestinians hate Jewish people is not true. I think that if the Palestinians were the majority in a multi-ethnic, truly democratic country, I don't think they would persecute Jews there. Obviously, there'd be a lot to work out in terms of, land rights and housing rights, given the fact that Israelis have stolen a lot of Palestinian land and homes, and that would be complicated to work out. But that's life. I'm sorry that, again, the U.S. has struggled with that because it always purported to be a multi-ethnic state, but of course it had slavery, it had the genocide of Native Americans, and all those things have not completely been worked out or remedied, but there's been a lot of progress towards that. And, people have to give up some things for those things to be remedied, and that's just how it goes. I mean, but you cannot continue to have this apartheid state, and that is what it is, anyone who's honest believes it's an apartheid state where you continue to push people out of their homes, where you continue to corral them by walls and by wire fences, and treating them, I'm sorry, like animals. That is not sustainable. And by the way, I remarked to a number of people when I was there, how is that even desirable for Israelis? I mean, Jerusalem's a beautiful city, but it ain't so beautiful with all these walls, these disgusting concrete walls that are everywhere, right? Bethlehem is now completely surrounded by a wall, a disgusting wall. Is that how Israelis want to live? They want to live behind walls? Is that ideal? I mean, the truth is they don't want to live that way. They see that as temporary, but they have a final solution in mind. It's just to get rid of all the Palestinians. But you know what? We don't support that sort of thing. That's called ethnic cleansing. It's called genocide. And the world community can't accept it and shouldn't accept it. So there's going to have to be changes. And again, Israel's the one that prevented a two-party or a two-state solution. And now they don't even claim to support it. Now at least they're being honest, right? Because they were dishonest for quite a while, saying they wanted a two-state solution when in fact they were doing everything to prevent it. So
actually, I totally agree with you. I don't think that Israelis, whoever was the leaders, believed in a two-state solution. And to be honest with you, I believe in that the one-state solution would be a better option for all, including the Jewish people, the Muslims, the Christians, the atheists, whoever wants to live, or the Palestinian territory. As you said, one person, one vote. It would be one constitution. Everyone is equal in front of this constitution, and everybody has the similar, same duties and same responsibilities and the same rights in front of the constitution and in front of the state. This would be a judicial system based on human laws and not religious laws, and just like any other civilized place around the world. This is just my opinion about it, and I think that would end this carnage. But with the presence of this radical Zionism, and also with the ideology of what they believe in the Armageddon and in the coming of the second coming of Jesus, and there are people pushing this narrative from the United States, and some of these people are in the establishment, they are in the ruling elite, which makes me wonder if these people really believe in this, or they're just using this religious aspects to further their foreign policy aspects of foreign policy interests of Washington, D.C. But if we want to take a little bit to the east, more east of Palestine, let's go speak a little bit about Ukraine. I want to touch on this because nowadays we were saying for a long time, I was saying for a long time that they're going to abandon Ukraine. It's a squeezing lemon for them, and once they take over the reconstruction process, and who is going to reconstruct what is destroyed in what is left from Ukraine, and after they launder enough money in Ukraine, they will try to freeze this conflict, and this is what we are seeing nowadays. But there is only one country which I see on the map nowadays in the European Union or in Europe, which is Hungary. Hungary blocks 50 billion euro of EU funding for Ukraine. Hungary has blocked 50 billion euro in EU aid for Ukraine just hours after an agreement was reached on starting membership talks. Summary of the night shift: veto for the extra money to Ukraine. Hungarian President Viktor Orbán said after Thursday's talks in Brussels. EU leaders said Ukraine would not be left without support. Ukraine is critically dependent on EU and US funding as it continues to fight occupying Russian forces. The aid blocking was announced by Orbán shortly after the EU leaders decided to open membership talks with Ukraine and Moldova, and to grant candidate status to Georgia. Hungary, which maintains close ties with Russia, has long opposed membership for Ukraine, but not veto that move. And this is a new a video for Viktor Orbán. He posted it on his Twitter account. He says, starting accession negotiations with Ukraine is a bad decision. Hungary didn't participate in the decision. Let's take a look what Orbán has to say here.
Lassan 8 órája gyúrjuk itt egymást Brüsszelben a miniszterelnöki csúcstalálkozón. Nagy vitát folytatunk Ukrajna Európai Uniós tagságáról. Magyarország álláspontja világos. Ukrajna nem felkészült arra, hogy megkezdjük vele a tárgyalásokat az uniós tagságról. Teljesen értelmetlen, irracionális és helytelen döntés ilyen körülmények között megkezdeni Ukrajnával a tárgyalásokat, és Magyarország nem is módosítja az álláspontját. Ellenben 26 másik ország ragaszkodott ahhoz, hogy ez a döntés megszülessen. Ezért Magyarország úgy döntött, hogy ha 26-an így döntenek, menjenek a maguk útján. Magyarország ebben a rossz döntésben nem kíván osztozni, és ezért Magyarország a döntéstől a mai napon távol maradt. A tárgyalások folytatódnak a költségvetés módosításával.
So the president of Hungary says this is a bad decision. And from what I see of the 27 or 28 now EU countries, it's only Hungary who says no to the NATO demands. And ironically, this is a right-wing government in Hungary, which in the previous times, the right-wing groups were mostly aligned with the American foreign policy, and now it seems that the liberals are more, what they call themselves, the liberals are more aligned with the American foreign policy. Why is it only Hungary, in your opinion, who is following the national interest of Hungary instead of following the American grand strategy in Europe?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it is shocking to see what's happened, to see a great country like Germany, willingly self-destruct, in the interest of the United States and against its, the well-being of its own people. And all of Western Europe, to some extent, is doing that, as you say, clearly against their own self-interest. Why this is happening, that's a hard thing for me to understand. Some people talk about a country like Germany being still occupied by the United States military and the U.S. military being in a number of these other countries. Oh, I guess that's true, but I don't know if I would attribute it to that. I think that these countries have lost their national identity and have some time ago, and they see themselves as basically kind of the partner to U.S. imperialism, the willing, little imperialists, because that's all they can muster these days, right? Their empires are gone, and they I guess enjoy being in the reflected glory of the United States, such as it is. It's the only way I can explain it. And their populations aren't happy. I mean, there's major protests throughout Europe, particularly in France and Great Britain, and there's been some in Germany as well, Slovakia. And like the Green Party in Germany won't survive because of this, right? I mean, they just won't. So literally, they're even acting against their own political self-interest. But there will be a reckoning. There will be a reckoning. These governments won't last. And at some point, leaders will emerge, whether from the left or from the right. I think, honestly, those categories don't mean what they used to mean. It's certainly, I think it's a very complex what those things mean today. But I think you're going to see a Charles de Gaulle rise up who is willing to take on the United States. I think that's the only type of leader that can lead Europe out of this morass, out of this self-destruction, and frankly, self-abasement, which is really what it is.
But maybe they should hit first the bottom, right? They should have a moment of decline, and then so that they rise again and have such leaders. Maybe there should be hard times. I'm not wishing hard times, but this is the circle of life. Like probably this is now a decline, and they would hit the bottom, and then they rise again, and they will have leaders like Charles de Gaulle, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's like an alcoholic. You gotta hit rock bottom, right? You gotta realize you have a problem, and they have not acknowledged they got a problem, right? Imperialist Anonymous, I guess. But yeah, no, I think that's right, and it's sad because I've always been a fan of Europe. I've always been a bit of a Europhile. And it's sad to see these countries having really lost self-respect is what it seems to me. And again, to give up the natural gas from Russia, which they depended on for even when it was the Soviet Union, they needed it, right? And to allow the Nord Stream to be destroyed clearly by the United States. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how irrational people can act. And that's all it seems to be. Yeah.
Actually, then the coalition in Germany, where I live here, the Greens and the Social Democrats, they are as if they're conspiring to bring the right-wing opposition party AfD to power. And the type of statements they make and the type of provocations they make to the people, it's beyond me. Sometimes I truly ask myself the question, do they really believe what they're saying when they come to give a statement, which as a rational person who follows German politics since I'm here, I find it really hard for me to swallow what they're saying. And if I put myself in the shoes of the German, I would be really pissed off of what the politician here is saying in regards to the German foreign policy. And yesterday I was checking the Twitter account of Zelensky just to see what is he writing. Recently, I didn't see he's writing a lot. And he says, I spoke with Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor Olaf Scholz. I thank Chancellor Scholz for his personal effort and Germany for his leadership. Germany's support for Ukraine is growing by the day. We see it and we'll always remember it. And then the Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz says, Germany stands firmly by Ukraine's side as long as it takes. And this is, sorry, like I'm laughing about it, but this is only comes at the time when Germany's economy, as you mentioned, is being like destroyed. And this is the Bundestag, the federal parliament of Germany, suspends debt break for fiscal year 2023. The Bundestag reacts to the Karlsruhe budget ruling and declares an extraordinary emergency situation. So the situation in Germany is not ideal, and this terminology is as long as it takes. It is provocative to the people. People are asking, what is the time frame? What is the goal? If the goal is to kick out the Russian forces from the entire Ukraine, then the recent experience of the counteroffensive proved that it is unattainable. So what is the goal here? Why should the German taxpayers continue paying all this? So those are the questions that are being asked by the German people. I'm just echoing what they say. And apparently, this is all giving a big service to the opposition party. And now we have a split in the left party, which is the Linke, where we have a very famous anti-imperialist figure called Sarah Wagenknecht. And Sarah, she split it from her party, the left party, and she formed her own coalition now. And I think there's going to be some change in Germany. But before that, there may be a major economic recession in the country, so that when there is a strong economic recession, people usually vote for the parties that they haven't tried before, and they go to they call it here far right, right in Germany. But now with the Netherlands that voted for the far right, I think this could be also have a domino effect over Europe. Do you think that this, what they call the far right groups, could save Europe from such a scenario?
I don't know. I mean, at least they're nationalist and they will, at least defend the national interest in a way these governments aren't. Obviously, I would prefer leftist governments to come to power, but the left is very weak and I think ideologically confused, and has been really since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so the left does not appear to offer a lot to people at the moment, sadly. Hopefully that will change. In the meantime, you're probably going to have some hard right parties, again, that at least will be nationalist and operate in the national interest more than these other parties. Hopefully they don't do other damage in the process. Obviously we've seen a rightist government come to power in Germany after a recession before, and that didn't go so well.
Yes.
I don't expect that again, but God, I don't think we expected anything we've seen in the last 2 years. I wake up every day and I'm surprised. As Lennon said, there are years that go by when nothing happens, and then there's weeks go by when decades happen, and that's what we're living in right now.
Yeah, one day I was saying that there is not going to be a Russian incursion into Ukraine, and then I woke up in the morning, the Russian forces are in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I never expected something like the October 7 happens, and then you wake up in the morning now, the first thing I do, I open my Twitter or X. It's like, what the hell is happening in the world? Just wake up and start your day on such big events. It's unpredictable in my opinion. So I stopped making any predictions. I just only try to analyze the situation after it happens. Guys, just for a reminder before I end up this conversation with Dan, this is his new upcoming book. It's coming in March 2024. The Case for Palestine, Why It Matters and Why You Should Care. As I told you, this is an Amazon link, but you can check the publisher house and you can contact the publisher house and also pre-order it from the publisher house, as Dan said. And also the account of X of Dan is in the description below. Please, guys, give me do a service to me and also follow his work. It's very important to follow different perspectives when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to Ukraine and other geopolitical issues. And I think Dan Kovalik has a great insight, and also he is standing on a humanitarian ground, which is double important in my opinion in such a times for the humanity that is watching all this footage coming from the Gaza Strip, and we are crying deep inside when we see all these images, the devastation that is inflicted upon the Palestinian people, before that on the Syrian people, before that on the Libyan people, Iraqi people, just name it. It's just non-stop. So this work that we do on social media platforms is to stop this madness and to stop the killing. And we know that I can coexist with Dan can coexist with X, and X can coexist with Y, regardless of the religion. I believe that in Syria, the Jewish people safer nowadays than in Israel, and I would encourage more state sponsorship to I would say encourage them to come back to Syria. Those who left to the United States 2-3 decades ago, the mosaic of any society should include all the components of the society. And I believe that the Jewish people are a beautiful component that can return back to Syria soon, inshallah, as we say in Arabic. Dan, thank you so much again for being my guest today. It was really a pleasure to have you from the United States, and hope to see you soon in a different continent, hopefully in Palestine, when the occupation is over as well, if we can meet there. So thank you again, Nan.
Thank you, Kevork. Salam alaikum. Peace,
Alaikum.
shalom, salam to everyone.
Guys, alaikum assalam as well. Peace be upon you. I hope your families and your beloved ones are all in peace and never see such carnage and such bloodshed. And this was our today's video, guys. If you like it, please share it with your friends. And if you like to support my independent work, you can see the link is here on the screen, www.patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow. Ciao.